I'm thrilled to introduce our next speaker, Tyndall, Senior Vice President at System1. He is a thought leader, a global partnerships leader, and is here today to discuss his insights on effectiveness in the age of efficiency. His concept around compound creativity is making waves in the industry, and today is going to be one of the first times he's sharing it live. So please join me in welcoming Andrew to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Well, a full room on a Wednesday evening. Very good stuff, hey? I'm Andrew Tyndall. I lead thought leadership at System1. Quick show of hands, who's heard of System1? Oh, I'm doing my job, hey? Well, when you all leave, you'll all know about System1, which is good. So, marketing squeeze. I wanted to share where I think the marketing squeeze is coming from these days, and then the golden bullet, some bravery to avoid the squeeze. I'm going to start, like all good presentations, with a story about a dog. So I was at a marketing effectiveness awards a few weeks ago, and there's the usual wankers there, but there was this one nice guy that I was sat next to. These guys like that one. There's this one very nice guy I was sat next to, and we got talking about what kind of what we do for work, like you do at these things, because there's nothing else to talk about. And the wine started flowing, and the real questions started coming out. And it turns out he's a CMO for a very large dog charity, a pet charity in the US, and he uses a lot of TV, broad reach TV. And I'm a bit of a radio fanatic. And I like to pitch radio effectiveness at people because I'm a wanker. And he said, look, Andrew, that's all good, all well and good, you know, but how could I measure each donation with a radio ad? And it turns out he's using connected TV or linear TV with a QR code on it, which he'd like to, track the ROI of every single campaign, how much it's cost to get each donation. And that's efficiency, that's not effectiveness, hey? Efficiency versus effectiveness, which always reminds me of the hare and the tortoise story, which has been made with AI. So this is the only useful thing I've seen made by AI yet. And the Coke Christmas ad was quite good. So look, the hare got to the end. No. The hare's very quick, but didn't get to the end. The hare's annoyingly efficient. The tortoise is very slow, but he reached the end of the journey. The tortoise is boringly effective, and that's the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. And we're going to hear about measurement today and the marketing squeeze. And always ask yourself whether something's an efficiency metric or an effective metric. Effectiveness is about achieving the job at hand, getting the job done. Efficiency is about fine-tuning things. And it's not our fault that we've become a little bit efficiency metric obsessed, because there's a load of great tools to measure kind of what I would call efficiency metrics, and I hope this agrees with what everyone else is going to talk about after me. Efficiency metrics. I've adapted this one from the IAB toolkit on measurement, which is looking at what the jobs to be done by advertising and the time frame that it impacts. We've got attribution, brand studies, controlled experiments, and MMM, which I'm still convinced is completely fucking made up. So these things are really good at triangulating and fine-tuning decisions, but what they are is efficiency outputs. Often what they're telling you is about ROI. ROI is an efficiency output. It's not about incremental growth. It's not about completing the marketing task. So marketers need to take a step back and think about the inputs into marketing, what you guys can control to grow effectiveness, to create incremental gains. And there's two jobs to be done from an advertising point of view. The first job to be done is to reach broad new audiences with fluent, enjoyable advertising. To speak to people you've not spoken to before, to refresh brand structures, and to create positive memory structures that create future demand. The other, you could call that the long of it, or you could call it creating future demand. It depends which church of marketing you worship. And the other job to be done is kind of the short of it, capturing future demand. Targeted activations or advertising that speaks to those in market with the right message that creates some kind of, any kind of emotional response to change behavior. Very difficult thing to do because we're all very obsessed with these output metrics and not the input. So I today, I've brought with me the golden bullet, and that's my new research called compound creativity. So how are we going to grow these marketing inputs and create effectiveness? And the answer is to not change. So this new research we've just launched with the IPA at System1. It took us 12 months to put together, and I haven't slept in the past few weeks. It's gone so incredibly well. People are hounding me for it. They're beating the doors down to hear more about it. But before I get into the detail, like any good bit of research, how about we look at one ad to start with, to set the scene. And it's an ad from, I won't prime you, a good bit of research here. I won't prime you. It's an ad from 2017. Let's have a look.
Good morning, Yorkshire Tea. Oh, he was meeting the farmers in Kenya. Let me just check if he's back. Just popping you on hold.
Thanks for holding. Putting you through. Yorkshire Tea, where everything's done proper.
Good morning, Yorkshire Tea.
A brilliant campaign, and not just because I'm from Yorkshire. How about one more ad, same brand, Yorkshire Tea, in case you haven't worked that one out yet. But this time from 5 years later in 2022.
Oh no. Brothers, sisters, today a great legacy rests upon your shoulders. Because here, we make more than just tea. We make proper brews. Brews that bring a tear to your eye and warmth to your soul. So go out there and do it for each other. Do it for yourselves, but most of all, do it for Yorkshire! Oh, and the fire drill's Thursday at 3.
Yorkshire Tea, where everything's done proper.
Can't tell you how many times I've watched that ad this week, and how it's still fucking hilarious. So it's great to see Yorkshire Tea win gold at the IPA Awards this year with this campaign. It's an enduring creative idea, and what we used to call a campaign, but now the word campaign's somewhat lost its meaning. I'm sure a few of us are guilty of it in this room, but you'll hear the word digital campaign thrown around, or Halloween campaign, or out-of-home campaign. The word campaign has lost its meaning. So Yorkshire Tea in 2017 launched the Where Everything's Done Proper to incredible sales success. But 7 years later at the brand, not much has changed, apart from an additional 15 percentage points in market share. Wow. And that's the most robust chart I'll be sharing in this entire presentation. Really proper stuff there. So that's what I'm going to talk about over the next 15, 20 minutes. It's how consistency compounds creativity, how not changing is actually what we need to be doing in this marketing squeeze. So why have we created this research? Well, look, digital platforms are booming, and they're all demanding more and more assets off everyone. Assets made specifically. Is that me? All good, AV? Yep, thumbs up. All good? Okay, I'll try to stop spitting. Platforms, digital platforms, yes, they're demanding more from us, hey? And they're demanding assets that are made specifically for their platform. And it's harder and harder to keep up with this. And also, they're claiming that kind of assets are wearing out every week. So the demands of assets are growing and growing. Secondly, the costs and demands of agency pitches is going up, hey? It's getting harder and harder, the agency pitch landscape. But still, yeah, the first thing that marketers do when they get into a new role is look at what they can change. Possibly because of this marketing squeeze, we're all under a lot of pressure. So what System1 and IPA have done here is put together research to convince people that we need to change less and to grow bravery around sticking at it. And this research is actually built from, who's heard of the long and short of it? Show of hands again. Okay, some effectiveness nerds in the room. Nice. So yeah, the long and short of it, showing how long-term campaigns produce more brand effects. It's also built from, this one's a harder one. Who's heard of Jenny Rumanak? Okay, a shy hand. Don't be shy, guys. We're all friends. Okay, Jenny Rumanak and a concept of distinctive brand assets. We've built from that. Fluent Devices, Orlando Wood, our Chief Innovation Officer, invented the term fluent device. Kevin the Carrot's a fluent device. I'll go into what that means. But also building on this idea of creative wear-out. Creative wear-out doesn't exist. And I'll share more about that in the research. So, in this research as well, what I'm also going to share with you is that consistent brands produce advertising that works twice as hard than inconsistent brands. That campaigns from consistent brands lead to 27% more very large brand effects. That campaigns from consistent brands even report double the very large profit gain. And I've estimated that just the brands in this research over the next 5 years in the UK alone, inconsistency is going to cost brands £3.5 billion. So some pretty meaty headlines. How the hell did we get there? So look, we all locked ourselves in a room for 12 months and we blind coded 56 brands across 13 different creative consistency features, things that we all need to be starting to keep the same. That involved analysing over 4,000 TV ads. It did involve hiring a few interns to do that, admittedly. And those over 4,000 TV ads have been tested with System1's Test Your Ad. We'll get onto that measurement in a second. On over 600,000 consumers over the 5-year period that we analyse these brands to get to creative quality and how consistency impacts creative quality. So then we also compared these brands to the YouGov data bank to understand brand strength. So how consistency impacts brand strength over this 5-year period. And then we also match these brands to the IPA effectiveness data bank. Do we know, raise of hands if we know what the IPA effectiveness data bank is? Okay, we're limbering up. People are getting more confident. Their hands are going higher. I'm going to go with 50%. I'll explain it. When you submit an effectiveness award to the IPA, they harvest that data and turn it into the most impressive effectiveness data bank in the world, which allows you to do studies like this. So we match these brands to the IPA effectiveness data bank, and then we can look at what brands are leading to more business and brand effects. And it's a very impressive study. This slide is supposed to make you convinced that it's very robust. Look at all those brands. Lots of brands, hey? And I've presented this a few times. And I've had twice now, someone's reached out afterwards and told me that I've not used their latest logo, which is incredibly ironic now. Kind of missed the point, hey? So we coded these 56 brands for 13 different creative consistency features over a 5-year period. But what do those 13 consistency features mean, Andrew? Well, let me show you. So we split those 13 features into 3 distinct buckets that you need to take back to work and think about what are you going to do consistently in your marketing team. So this is kind of the building blocks of consistency. The first one is consistent creative foundations. How are you going to keep your creative foundations consistent as a brand? And a great example of this in the research was with GWR, Great Western Railway. It's a very Rory Sutherland insight, this, but they got to the idea that planes and cars may be quicker and cheaper than trains, but nothing beats the experience and sense of adventure on a train. Very Rory Sutherland insight, if anyone listens to that guy. So they stuck to that insight-driven positioning for 7 years now. And they've used the famous 5, these lovable characters, for that period as well. And they've also stuck with their creative team, Adam and Eve, for 7 years as well. Sure, they've done other bits of performance and digital campaigns, but they've kept these foundations the same. Insight-driven positioning. They've stretched the creative 5 into out-of-home and digital. And they've even kept Adam and Eve. So great example of what I would call creative foundations, which is the first bucket of features we looked at in this research. Secondly, a culture of consistency. And it's starting to turn into a Yorkshire tea pitch, but bear with me. That first ad I played has been on air for 7 years at a time. 7 years. They've used it for 7 years. Absolutely insane. Yorkshire tea actually, on average, use an ad for 2 years at a time. There's some brands in the research that only use ads for 14 days on average. Like, insane, right? Admittedly, they're more retail brands because they've got lots to say all the time, but a category is never an excuse. So we looked at ad life. The nerdy research language for that is ad life. How long do you keep the ads on air for? We looked for evidence, and this is a key one for this room, I imagine, of teams working together to put campaigns across the media mix. You know, is it just TV and then you've got a different campaign, you're out of home or digital? So across the mix consistency. Then we've got this really weird one called commitment to showmanship. And we looked at the idea of a brand being entertaining and right-brained consistently over the 5-year period, often you see brands be very entertaining, and then they go back to over the next few years, it's like hard sell, direct TV, calling people up and begging them for money. No, we look for the evidence of brands that we're able to be brand building and entertaining over a 5-year period. And we also look for a very boring one, but do brands reuse assets and cut downs and stretch campaigns further? So that's the second bucket of features we need to think about, a culture of consistency within a business, which Yorkshire Tea does very well. And the third bucket of features is what you might think of when I say consistency, and that's execution. We looked for evidence of brands using characters, celebrities, slogans, brand assets, tone of voice, and soundtracks over this 5-year period. Not the absolute use, but a consistent use over time. It doesn't matter that Kevin the Carrot isn't in every one of Aldi's ads, but using him consistently over a 5-year period is key. So these are 13 different features that we saw impacting effectiveness that we really need to think about and create an almost consistent strategy for our brands of how are we going to grow our consistency in these areas. And before I go on to show you some really mind-blowing headlines, it's worth considering what brands are in the study. So we apply the learnings correctly. First of all, we had to get every ad for these brands over the 5-year period, and System1 test every UK TV ad as it goes live. So we luckily had all these brands and all their ads waiting, but that means that they're quite heavy TV spenders. So these are quite big brands. Secondly, and it's why we've called it compound creativity, the creative quality of these brands is much higher than the global average. So the headline in this research, the caveat is, I'm not saying consistency is, everyone just, go to work tomorrow, don't change anything, it's going to be okay. You can't be shit to start with. You've got to find that creative spark and then let consistency go to work. And when I say creative quality, and this is very much exit through the gift shop, I mean System1's creative testing. So how does it work? Because you'll see our metrics throughout, and you might see them on LinkedIn if you're unlucky. We show a large crowd of representative consumers a piece of ad, and we measure their branded emotional response to advertising to create our creative measurement metrics. We have a star rating, which predicts future demand. That metric I was talking about at the very start. Number one job of advertising: reach future audiences, make them feel good, and create future demand. Star rating with ESOV, so media spend, extra share of voice, predicts around half of long-term market share changes. So it's a very powerful metric for understanding the creative input into advertising. Secondly, we have spike rating, which predicts an ad's ability to capture in market demand, the long and the short. And finally, we have quickly becoming my favorite metric, because when you work in research, you start getting favorite metrics. I'm incredibly boring. Is fluency, which you could call ad distinctiveness. It's the percentage of people that can recognize what brand an ad is for after one viewing. So we were able to look at consistency and brand distinctiveness over this research as well. So I bet you're all ready for the first headline, because I've been going on quite a bit. So our first headline is consistent brands produce higher creative quality. When we split this huge group of over 4,000 ads by how consistent the brands were, we can see that consistent brands produce advertising with significantly higher star ratings than the least consistent brands. And we can do something fancy with creative quality. We can model in-market growth by assuming someone's media spend, which you could call ESOV efficiency, but that's very wanky, so I won't do that. But so we'd expect brands creating advertising with 3.3 star creative quality to grow an additional market share point every year compared to brands with a 2.6 star rating. It's quite a significant jump. Consistency is really doing something here that's leading to higher creative quality and market share changes. And then jumping into a more controversial but specific feature that we looked at, and that's agency changes. We looked at how many times these brands changed agency over this period. And this event's called the marketing squeeze. You're feeling squeezed. Maybe we call up our agency, we fire them, and we hire someone else. That will fix things, right? Well, not true. So we can see that brands that changed their agencies most over the period were producing lower average creative quality. But this could be creative Darwinism. It could be that, agencies that produce better work don't get fired more, and that's why you might be seeing this chart. So which is why I like this second chart from System1's data, where we looked at the change in ad distinctiveness annually over this 5-year period. And we can see that brands that change their agencies most saw every year that ad distinctiveness go down, so less and less people can recall what brand their advertising's for. As opposed to brands which stuck with their agency over the 5-year period, their ad distinctiveness goes higher and higher. Super interesting. Don't fire your agency, maybe. Maybe that's the message. Another feature we looked at is ad life. So how long a brand uses an ad for. And we can see that brands that keep their ads on air for longer produce higher than average creative quality. And this is kind of obvious, right? A brand that wants to keep their ads on air for 2 years at a time, and this is Yorkshire Tea again, but I had to remove the logo because it was getting very Yorkshire Tea heavy. And they don't pay me yet, so I'm not going to do it. So yeah, brands that are going to keep their ads on air for 2 years at a time, they're going to try a little bit harder to create better advertising than brands that only need to keep their ads on air for 14 days at a time, right? It's a bit obvious. But you could kind of explain these past few charts away by saying, look, this isn't true. We've hired a good agency. They've made better work. We've kept them for longer. We get more sales, so we keep their ads on air for longer. And consistency isn't causing these things. And which is why I like this last chart from System1, because it starts to point to consistency causing effectiveness. We looked at the change in creative quality annually over the 5-year period. And we can see that these least consistent brands, these brands that were changing agency, coming up with new ideas, changing their brand assets, changing the music, their creative quality stays incredibly stable over the 5-year period. They keep creating the same quality advertising year on year, as opposed to this middle third of these brands where we saw that they got incrementally better advertising over the 1-year period, every year getting better and better ads. But the most consistent brands, we saw quite a large jump of almost a 1/4 star rating, where the ads were getting stronger and stronger each year of the 5-year period. So something's going on here. And it's why we called it compound creativity, this research. Because the distance between you and your inconsistent competitor gets bigger and bigger every year as you hold steady and keep consistent. It gets compound, this effect. And if we do that really freaky thing and model in-market expected growth, ESOV efficiency, after this 5-year period, I'd expect advertising for the most consistent brands to grow market share at a rate more than twice as effectively than the least consistent brands. So super big jump. Why might we be seeing this? And well, let's go into kind of the consumer behavior and the marketing science behind this. There's a few key principles why consistency will work for you in the marketing squeeze. The first one is processing fluency. So if you repeat the same messages and ideas to a consumer, to someone, you lower processing fluency and they start to understand you more and quicker. This has two benefits. It's why brands often start with a 60-second ad in their media buy and then follow up later with a 20-second ad to keep the frequency and reach higher. Because once you've built the idea and you've landed the message, you start to comprehend it easier later on. And also, now we're all hooked on lower attention media channels, but I suspect you might beat me up outside after I've said this. But, there's really great high-reach media channels, but they're lower attention. If you lower processing these by being consistent, you can start to use these media channels more effectively. Maybe even land a campaign idea in a few seconds on digital. Secondly, a memory encoding from the world of Ehrenberg Bass. So if it's much easier to refresh memory structures than to build new ones. So brands that are refreshing the same memory structures become more distinctive, and they start to earn their category entry points, and they become more salient. And there's great evidence for this in a few slides. Another one, familiarity bias. We like the familiar. If you repeat the same ads, characters, soundtracks, assets, even campaign ideas, people start to like your advertising more through mere exposure. We might be seeing creative Darwinism here as well. Brands that are things that are going well for brands will change less. And finally, if someone's got lost from procurement and wandered into the room, here's one for you guys. creative efficiency. If you're not building that 60-page positioning deck every year, or hiring a new agency, what might you be thinking about every year is, effectiveness, creative effectiveness, long-term strategy. I put a cheeky extra slide in on the way over here because I was feeling rogue. So, it's Christmas time. Well, it's advertising Christmas. I don't know if consumers know it's Christmas yet, but it's Christmas time. All these ads are here, and they're full of what I would call a fluent device. Kevin the Carrot, the Morrison's gloves. What else have we got? Dawn French is a fluent device for M&S. Someone else want to shout out a Christmas fluent device? The Coat Trucks. Hey, mate, you've been doing your research. I'll give you that $5 after. Thanks, man. Coat Trucks. So a fluent device is a brand-owned asset that also delivers drama in advertising. It's different to a logo. It has to deliver drama in advertising. I've mentioned characters, but you can also do it with a creative concept. You're Not You When You're Hungry is a fluent device. Have a break. Have a Kit Kat. No, okay. Is a fluent device. And what's magical about fluent devices, and if we go back a slide, they're about processing fluency, and they start to make advertising work, but they take time. What we found in this research, brands that use fluent devices were actually producing the kind of similar work to brands that don't produce fluent devices. And then in the third and the fourth and the fifth year, you start to see this. That's why the Coke truck works every year, because you've built your fluent device. That's why Kevin the Carrot is now always scoring like 5.9 in our testing, because they've been hammering it for 7 years. So yeah, really interesting. Fluent devices take time to pay back. I've completely lost track of time. I hope we're okay. How long we got? Not a good sign. Okay, so we said we linked these brands to the YouGov data bank, and we saw that the most consistent brands are also the most famous and popular. But is this chicken or egg, right? Do consistent brands get big, or do big brands stay consistent? Which is why I like the IPA data bank, because it proves that consistency is driving these results. So we linked the brands to the latest campaigns in the IPA data bank, and we saw that the most consistent brands are driving more very large brand effects for their campaigns. Weird, that. So what do I mean by very large brand effects? All the good stuff. So campaigns from the most consistent brands lead to more salience, awareness, changing attitudes, differentiation. Interestingly, we saw consistency not impacting trust, because I truly believe that trust is an output of media choices. If you use more public and more wasteful media choices, that's how you build trust, versus telling someone, they should trust you, obviously. Okay, but what about the holy grail, right? What about business effects? We saw a very similar thing. Consistent brands produce campaigns that lead to more business effects than the least consistent brands, but the relationship's not perfect. So it's worth considering what consistency does do for your business and what consistency won't do for your business. So consistency drives more value share, so more value gain, more share gain, and double the very large profit gain. I love this because at the start of this, I showed you that creative quality is double for consistent brands, and then we show that profit is double at the end. All this data lining up. No one else impressed? All right, just me. So pop quiz. I know we're running out of time. Very quick pop quiz. If I'm growing market share gain and profit gain and value gain through consistency, but I'm not moving volume, so I'm not selling more units, but I'm growing more market share and profit, what am I doing to the brand? Price. Oh, mate, that was the quickest I've had it. Nice. Lowering price sensitivity. You're selling the same for more. And how do you drive that? Let's go back a chat. Differentiation. You drive price sensitivity through differentiation. More data lining up. No one else is impressed. I'll carry on. So what consistency doesn't do for business is these two things. The IPA track a market share decline, and if a brand can arrest market share decline, consistency doesn't help here. And also, if you're revitalizing a stagnant category that's not grown for many years. So basically, the learning here is if it's all going to shit, maybe you need to change something. It's not mind-blowing. Go back and find that insight. Is the creative idea right? Is the creative team right? And then start being consistent again. Or Einstein said it best, right? If you've got a load of one-star ads, there's no point hammering them. Maybe try something new. Whoop. Okay, very quickly, to finish off, there's this great research from System1 as well called the cost of dull. I encourage you to seek it out. It's high quality stuff. I didn't even make it, my boss did, but it is good stuff. I got jealous and I wanted to make the cost of change. So I looked at the brands in this research and modeled their ESOV efficiency, so how I'd expect them to grow in market based on their creative quality. And we'd expect just the 56 brands in this research over the next year alone, the least consistent brands have to spend 1.75 times more on media to grow at the same rate as the most consistent brands. So just the brands in this research, just over the next year, they'd have to spend nearly £500 million more on media to all grow at the same rate. And, well, because we know this effect compounds and the advertising from the most consistent brands gets stronger, but advertising for the least consistent brands keeps staying the same, over the next 5 years, this exasperates, it gets worse, it compounds. So we expect the brands just in this research of the next 5 years to have to spend nearly £3.5 billion more on media to all grow at the same rate, which is a massive cost of change. And the final message before I get thrown off the stage is, look, I'm not saying inconsistent brands don't lead to effects. Sure, you can come up with a new ad every year, you can hire a new agency every year, you can come up with a new creative idea, and you will see effects. But if you've put in the time and you've got that creative spark, that positioning, that idea, found that team, you've built a culture of consistency in your business, and you're seeing those effects, when you stay consistent, it compounds these effects and you make the most out of creativity and effectiveness. So in the marketing squeeze, we should all be a little bit more consistent, hey? And you can get all the slides and a few extra cheeky ones in there on me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was fantastic.